Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalron. We did it. We took a look at every single class in BFA beta and took a look at what they are like, gave you guys a little bit of an impression as well as my first thoughts on every single class besides the warrior. In this video we'll be taking a look at the warrior, and honestly there's a keyword for every single one of these that I'm going to focus. The warrior was a class I was super excited about, and my impressions are varied depending on specializations. The words we're going to be using are the chop, the auto attack, and the boring, as those are the best words that I can describe about every single one of the specializations, but you guys will have to figure out. So vote in the comments now, which one do you think is the chop, the auto attack, and the boring in the comments below. I'll wait until you get your answer. Ten more seconds left to comment. Thank you so much for putting in your input in the comments. I will probably not read the actual comment, and anybody who actually went and commented, I will see you. Even if I see you, I will see you delete the comment afterwards. I will be watching this video as it goes live. So let's see if you guys get to entertain me. Anyway, let's first start off with the chop, the arms warrior. This specialization is all about slicing and dicing past your foes. For the most part, you don't really have any burst. It really feels a lot like you always have potential to do a lot of damage. It just, you gotta get to set up whether you have the damage whenever you want to or not. They removed all your cooldowns, so you don't have a single ability that's a buff for TD unless you decide to talent into Avatar. And I really mean it, the only way you can burst anybody is by hitting Colossus Smash. Then you have 10 seconds of raw power to blast into the enemy until you're just kinda out of damage. It feels a lot like the Shadow Priest of, I wanna say, Miss Pandaria, or the Boomkins of Cataclysm. You know, they were one of those classes that didn't really have a massive cooldown in order to increase their damage, you know, just something to buff your damage going outwards, but rather they were always a class that dealt very high damage, but your variance between very high and then very low wasn't really there. You were always doing like average or above average damage. And I actually like that playstyle in some classes. When they added for Boomkin Incarnation or Astral Power or Astral Celerity or whatever it was at the time when they added in Pandaria, I find it a little bit weird. I was way too used to the boomy playstyle of Cataclysm, where whenever you have Star Surge procs and a lot of dots, and if you can line up 3 mushrooms under an enemy and explode them at the same time, that was how you bursted. Past that, you always did good damage whether you have cooldowns or not. But it also means that you don't have any way to ramp up your cooldowns out of nowhere with a big button to press. And I like that playstyle. I thought for somebody who was starting out with the Warcraft, that was probably the best thing that I enjoyed. Same thing goes for Shadow Priest back in Warlords, when you could still use your disarm combo with your Shadow Orbs and everything. You always dealt good damage. The only way to increase your burst is to send a pet, a Shadow Fiend, to gnaw at the enemy's ankles until you shoot them off, but past that you always did good damage. So that reliability always was fun, and it gave the player a lot more control. You weren't tied to a cooldown, so it was really all about, do you have the resources to set up damage? Yes, you do. Have fun executing it, and if you execute it right, it feels a lot more empowering than just popping cooldowns and smashing through someone. And that's something we are getting with arms. You're gonna always feel empowered, you're always gonna feel reliable. Even the playstyle for the specialization is a bit different. On Rage, the spec feels great. It's probably the best in terms of rage regeneration and rage spending, because of the way they use an overpower mechanic. So the way arms works right now, just for anybody who's played arms in the past, now you have Overpower as a baseline ability. Your Overpower, every time you use it, buffs your next Mortal Strike. So now you're spending globals in order to use Overpower. On top of that, abilities that generally consume Rage have a chance to reset Overpower to be off cooldown, so you can use it again. So you can go Overpower, Slam, Overpower, Reset, Overpower, then Mortal Strike, Overpower, get Reset, Overpower. So then you have these globals where you're not always spending energy. So specialization for single target starts to feel very consistent and very good. For AoE, you have a couple different components. You have Bladestorm, Baseline, You still have Whirlwind, you still have a plethora of talents that help you do more things like make Colossus Smash and AoE, a lot like your Artifact weapon, which now doubles up as an AoE and a single target, which I kind of have been enjoying. And then you also have Sweep and Strike's baseline. So a lot of abilities get simply returned back baseline to the warrior specialization for arms, and it really do a lot of damage. You really hit pretty hard. Your executes are great. The fact that you can cleave from executes and other abilities is awesome. The fact that you have a good sustained damage rotation is great. The fact that your damage is pretty consistent throughout the whole fight is great, so you're not tied to cooldowns. With the way that BFA has been with GCD, some classes feel great with cooldowns and others not really, and having a class that's generally without any cooldowns overall feels pretty great to play. Overall, I have to say arms are in the best position they could be right now in BFA. Of course, there's plus or minus on the damage numbers, but the spec feels pretty great, and out of all the changes that could have happened to them into BFA, I think they got pretty decent changes overall. Now we get the next one, the Otter Attack. That is the best way to describe Fury Warrior. From no matter what, no matter if it's a boss fight or ad fight or anything, every time I take a look at Fury Warrior numbers, most of my damage comes from auto attacks. And that's something I didn't realize at first. I didn't want to play around the auto attack. I didn't want to accept this because I'm so hell-bent on playing Fury in Legion. The way that Fury right now feels in Legion, once you have the right gear, it is an awesome, indescribable feeling of just pure explosive power on demand. It is amazing. It is vicious. It is rough. It is rugged, and it's everything you ever wanted in a Christmas basket. It is amazing the way Fury Warrior plays right now in Legion, and it is something that is definitely going to be sorely missed in BFA. And trying to adapt the same playstyle of Fury into BFA was basically the worst way of going about it, which is the first thing I tried and the first thing everybody else tried. What I realized pretty quick about specialization, most of your damage comes from your auto attacks. You are a class, and I guess a lot of classes are also impacted by this. A lot of the melee classes that simply do a lot of damage from their swings, mostly the strength classes. The strength classes probably do the most amount of damage from the auto attacks. As a Fury Warrior, you are a warrior with two-handers, two powerful weapons in each hand. And if you look at the damage numbers after the spread, your melee probably can do some of the most damage in the game compared to your rampages, your raging blows, your bloodthirst, your whirlwinds. None of those abilities come close to what you can do from melee swings on its own. So I had to adapt. I had to change the playstyle. I had to go for ability of Frenzy. So on my Wild Strikes, I can build up 15% extra haste. That made the specialization, that 15% haste, felt so much better. That haste feeds into my auto attacks, and keeping myself enraged at all times became super easy. So instead of going for some crazy one-shot wombo combo, I basically changed my talents to always be enraged at all times, and the playstyle came together. Fury is still one of the specializations that is in a weird spot. Your cooldowns don't feel quite as impactful, as they increase the damage of your abilities, but your abilities are hitting for so much less than auto attacks, it makes you wonder if it's even worth going for any abilities that increase your damage. You might as well just go for a full-on auto attack build, staying in enrage for as long as possible. And the damage you really get a decent amount. So there are problems with Fury. It is one of the specializations that didn't have a smooth transition from Legion into BFA. Hell, a lot of the developers, I guess, whoever was working on Fury, did not say that, hey, by the way, we're reducing all of your other abilities' damage to almost nothing, while auto attacks are taking a huge leap forward. Because if anybody told me that, then I would have understood that maybe I might want to play around auto attacks. The specialization is still going to be a little bit rough. I really think Fury needs to be redone completely. A lot of the talents don't really fit. With BFA, the general synergy for a lot of the classes that are done well in terms of talents is you're putting talents that are AoE against each other. You're putting talents that deal with resources against each other, single target talents against each other, mobility versus heal versus defensive against each other, maybe CC versus mobility versus a heal against each other, and for the most part, a lot of them make sense. For Fury is one of the specializations that hasn't changed. It's a lot like the Frost DK. If Frost DK literally was just left abandoned as a child, that's kind of what Fury is at right now. I really think some developer needs to take a look at Fury again, maybe change some of those talents, because with the way that you have the specialization done right now, you either need to increase the damage of a lot of your abilities, because right now they really do tickle, and change them for abilities that have to do with auto attack playstyle, or increase the damage of abilities, decrease the damage of your auto attacks by a tremendous amount, and make the spec more about the abilities you pump rather than auto attacks that you do. But it's a little too hard to tell how the specialization is going to work, even if you were to do that. Overall, Fury is in a weird spot. It has a ramp-up mechanic. It has a different playstyle to it. It doesn't focus about the abilities, but rather staying in enrage. But is that a bad mechanic? it is not a bad mechanic. It's actually kind of fun. To always try to strive to be enraged forever is something that you can do. But in Rage, the only thing it can really do is maintain somewhat considerable, somewhat doable single target DPS. For AoE, this is terrible. When it comes to burst, you don't really have any. Because of the GCD, you just get choked out by so many of your abilities, there's not really anything you can do as a Fury Warrior. So you really come down to just auto-attacking. But that auto-attacking playstyle on its own is actually kind of fun. The specialization is a weird spot where it's not doing too much damage and feels a little janky with some of the talents. But if you were to adjust a few talents and bump up the damage a little bit from maybe auto attacks or other abilities, then the specialization might actually feel very interesting. It almost feels like a vanilla type of specialization, where in vanilla, auto attacks were a good chunk of your damage. Sometimes just auto attacking was just part of your basic rotation. And Fury is something that's resembling an auto attack build warrior, which I think is a very, very interesting combination, because you're playing against mechanics that we haven't even tried in Legion, simply by auto attacks. I absolutely love it. The playstyle is there, it kind of fits together, especially if you're running my auto attack build, but the damage on its own just doesn't complete itself quite nicely, quite yet, and the talents are still kind of all over the place where they haven't been designed for BFA. But overall, I'm liking what they're doing with Fury. It was definitely weird to adjust to. I feel like if you guys do try Fury, try out my build in PTR or pre-patch, whichever one releases the pre-patch or availability for class changes early. And that's really past that. That's all I can really say. I honestly felt so sad about Fury Warrior trying it out. I honestly felt heartbroken because it's a specialization besides my Outlaw Rogue that I just found something exciting about, something awesome. And to see that it was just really completely just butchered with all the GCD stuff honestly broke my heart a little bit. But seeing it in its new light with an auto attack build and a viable option actually offers me a little bit of hope. So that's the state of Fury right now. Let's finally end this video with the final specialization. Now, what can I really say about Protection Warrior? I mean, I won't say I'm a Protection Warrior main, but I feel like I played it enough to the point where I done the Mage Tower challenge for Warrior. I can do normal and heroic and Taurus, I think. The mechanics aren't that difficult in the spec. It is kind of an underdog spec. So it is something that I kind of do like. The underdog warrior tank, even though you don't really want your tanks to be underdog by any measure. I guess I should say the experiences. I did be a Protection Warrior in Legion. I did get my Mage Tower challenge skin. I am able to do Antaurus on heroic as I tank. I understand the mechanics. I didn't try all of them, but I understand the mechanics, and I think I'm pretty sure I can do every single one of them from a tank perspective. But in BFA, when you're going from a Legion type of warrior where there's so many buttons to press, it's such a weird playstyle where you have to be hyper aggressive, hyper active in terms of the things you need to do. When you're going from a way where you have so many abilities that you can press basically the whole time through the fight, you're going from that hyper playstyle towards a very GCD, very slow playstyle. In BFA, you don't have your mechanic of Ignore Pain. The Ignore Pain was basically like the soft bubble mechanic that you would put for yourself. It will either be shield block, where you raise your shield and block 100% of the incoming damage, block and reduce how much damage you took passively. But also, when you don't have shield block up, you had the Ignore Pain, where you could ignore 90% of how much of damage you would take from the next few hits by the boss. Now Warrior's all about shield block, and that's it. I feel like a lot of the other tanks have a little bit more interesting playstyle. For example, a lot of the tanks have a way to self-heal, so when you can't, let's say, deal with physical damage, how do you deal with magical? Maybe have, pop a defensive and afterwards heal yourself as soon as possible, so the healer doesn't have to worry too much about you. Warriors don't have any way of doing that. Just about every other class for tanks does, or have some kind of way to mitigate damage. On Warrior, you end up generating a lot of rage as well. I feel like I'm always energy capped at first, or rage capped. At first, it feels like when you charge in, it takes about 40 rage just to get a shield block up. So it takes a bit of a while to get to that point. It's not just you charge in and there you go. 15 rage for that shield block in order to start the fight, so it feels a little bit weird. So you can't get mitigation up early. You kind of have to use abilities ahead of time if you do want to get the mitigation up early, which feels really, really weird for a warrior just to even do that. And past that, you only have shield block. So that you have so much rage, eventually you start building so much of it, what do you spend it on? You start spending it on abilities that deal damage that cost rage, which is not as satisfying as spending it on abilities that would otherwise give you mitigation. I feel like just about every single tank has at least 2 ways to mitigate damage. Most of them have some kind of a heal mechanic or some kind of a defensive mechanic. A lot of the classes have a way to deal with more than one type of damage incoming. For example, Protection Warrior has a shield slam that increases how much damage you can take physically. Then you have Demon Hunter with Demon Spikes. You have Bear with the Iron Fur. But then when it comes to doing anything else, what else can you do besides mitigating damage? Well, the Paladin can heal. He can help out his team. The Demon Hunter can go hyper aggressive and heal himself even more. He can even put a brand on the enemy to take less damage from that one enemy. He can amp up the fire damage so then it starts healing him even more. The Bear Druid can use Frenzied Regeneration. So it feels like you have at least 2 different abilities. And what I liked about Brewmaster in particular is the fact that you have your single target rotation as well as a defensive rotation. There's 2 different playstyles happening at the same time, and hence where there's a lot more going on at the same time as you're playing the game. You're trying to deal damage, but you're also trying to take as least damage as possible, and there's almost 2 different rotations going on. With Warrior, I feel like it's like even a worse version of a Protection Paladin in terms of how many things are going on, because it's really just one. You're just fighting the boss, trying to take as least damage as possible. But while that's happening, there's just not a lot to do. You end up generating so little rage at the start, so you can't get your shield block up. So your mitigation early game is pretty hard to acquire. But once you get the fight rolling, it feels like you're just rolling in rage. So what should you start doing from there on? I end up spending a lot of my rage when I don't need a shield block or when I just don't have a shield block available on abilities that would otherwise deal damage to the boss. And that's really about it. You still have probably the most amount of cooldowns in the game when it comes to dealing with different situations. Between Demoralizing Shout, reducing enemies damage by 20%, Shield Wall increasing your damage taken or damage reduction by I think 40% still. Then there's Last Stand, and then you get Commanding Shout for your party. So a lot of these abilities combined together can make you probably the tankiest tank besides a Protection Paladin who can survive things with Bubble. Outside of that, the rotation feels so weird. There are a few talents, and there are a few more talents still incoming for Protection Warrior before they're finalized, but it's just, it wasn't fun. I think it was probably the least fun tank that I played so far, and I'm actually very, very sad to say that. I don't really know if I'll be playing that much Warrior, especially in Protection spec. I guess it was a simple playstyle, it's just I wanted more out of it. It doesn't feel like it gives a lot of the player control to the player. You just kind of stand there and take damage. There's nothing you can do proactively to prevent a lot of the damage. If damage isn't coming, raise your shield. Past that, just go on through your rotation. It doesn't feel like it has a lot of depth. It went from being a specialization that had so much depth to it and so much adaptability. You had to be a faster player. You had to understand how the mechanics come in. You had to be able to manage energy, the rage, and how you're converting that rage into cooldown reduction as well as defensives and trying to balance a lot of things. And you're going from this very busy playstyle to this very, what's the reverse of busy? Just the most, I guess, lounging style playstyle. And you're really locked down because of GCDs. You're really locked down because you don't have enough gear, I guess. I don't really know how I feel about the specialization of Warrior. It definitely feels different. It feels reliable, like you don't take that much damage, but you just don't feel that great to play. And I think that's probably the final thing I could say about Prot. It just feels kind of boring. Overall, Warriors are in a really weird spot, and I was really just giving Blizzard as much time as possible to fix them or do any updates for them that are necessary. This is why I decided to cover this class in particular as the very last. I was hoping we would see some crazy new playstyle for Fury. I was hoping we were gonna see some crazy rework for Protection, as that class, as that spec of tank in particular, has kind of been up and down in BFA. But I think it's enough time that we waited, and I think it's time to release this video. So let me know your thoughts, guys, about Warrior. I honestly thought Fury has a potential playstyle with the Otter Attack build. I think that ARM's playstyle of just so much chop into your damage just feels so good to play. But the one that really disappointed me was the Protection. Only because that's the kind of tank that I actually did play in Legion, and it feels weird that it's now in that kind of playstyle in BFA. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about the Warrior specializations in the comments below. Are there any playstyles you're even thinking of playing, or is it about time to reroll to other classes? Is it looking like it's about a good time to reroll, or are you a Warrior for life? Let me know all that stuff in the comments below, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.